today we are joined on Capstone Talent Talks with Catriona Shearer, who is the Global Head of Data Center Consulting at JLL, and a passionate advocate for inclusive leadership. With a career spanning strategic consulting, client development and industry advocacy, Catriona brings deep insight into what's driving change across the data center industry. Catriona, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
So what we always love to start with is the scene setting. So tell us how on earth you got into the industry that is data centers and real estate and construction. Talk to us about the journey in.
So I think, like most people, my journey in was a little unconventional, in that I originally had a sales career, which I loved enormously. And then I decided that I wanted to do something slightly differently. I'd made it to sales and marketing director. I was working in some turnaround environments in terms of going into a business, unpicking what makes it tick and putting it back together to make it more profitable and more appealing to clients. So I was doing all of the front end work and I really enjoyed it, but it had become really familiar to me. It was not as challenging as it used to be. Once all of the moving parts started to make sense, I wanted to do something that had a little bit more variety, was a bit newer. So I started looking for a more operational role. In turnaround work, I had touched on operations consistently, continuously for several years, but it had never actually been in my job description, in my job title. And I found it literally impossible to get anyone to talk to me, let alone hire me for an operations role. So instead, being the mature adult that I am, I threw all my toys out of the pram and decided I was going to go self-employed to do it. If you won't hire me, I shall hire myself kind of attitude. So I reached out to the network that I had built over the few years that I've been in sales and did some really interesting work, and it was really varied. So I was doing some day rate contracting on with a pharmaceutical pharmacovigilance company around cost drivers and outsourcing and insourcing and all of the regulation that's behind pharmaceuticals. I did some sales and leadership training, some high performance training, one-to-one executive coaching, and through all of this discovered that what I really love to do isn't solve problems, which is what I thought I loved to do. I actually love building something because I was having the most fun, but I wasn't as fulfilled as I was when I was building businesses. So I decided to go back into the world of corporate so I could go back to making long-term investments in companies and growing something that was a bit more permanent rather than dipping in and out of companies to have small impacts, but for shorter periods. And then COVID arrived and wrecked my business overnight, which was a joy. And I randomly ended up getting a phone call from a friend 9 months after COVID hit, six months after COVID hit, to say, we've got this account, it could do with some love, you could do it with your eyes closed, shall I recommend you? And at this point I'm looking at my mortgage and my bank balance thinking, yes
Please.
yes Didn't even really ask what the job was. Yes, absolutely, please. So interviewed for the role, got the role. The first day in a data center was the day they handed me the keys and were like, this is yours now.
So which
how
role
long
was
did it go?
that? Which role was that then?
That's how I moved into CBRE, and I was the general manager for an account in the Southwest. I know, random.
That is so random and extraordinary. And I think when I've spoken to people about you, what I hear is she gets shit done.
Yeah, common theme.
Yeah, and you are a doer. So that is obviously. Were you in technical? Was the industry when in your sales and marketing? Were you in technical environments? No.
So I'd done a stint at Schneider Electric selling power systems. So I fundamentally understood the critical environment in terms of its criticality, but I had no real familiarity with it at all. This is my 10th industry. So I moved between industries purposefully because I really enjoy that first few months of knowing absolutely nothing. It's slightly sadistic. That's the bit that most people really hate, like feeling like a fish out of water, knowing nothing about anything at the stage where you don't even know what you don't know. That's my favourite bit. So I would move between industries to transfer all of the skills that I was confident I had, and I would learn to reapply them and reapply them and reapply them. But I would get all of that joy of a new industry and learning everything about it all at once at 100 miles an hour. Loved it.
And I guess that also gives you the opportunity to look at things just through a slightly different lens, because it's not like
Exactly.
you'd come from 5-10 years in the data center sector and you're thinking,
Exactly.
okay, well, this is what we would normally do, so let's do this. But actually, you're looking at this with a
Yeah.
a sort of 360 rounded view that actually is
Yeah.
underpinned by some of the work you did at Schneider, for example.
It's exactly that. And so I have a bit of an allergy to the we're doing it because it's the way it's always been done. Oh, that's a bit of an understatement, actually. I have quite a strong reaction to that because I'm quite a challenging, curious person, full stop. So it's very much in my nature to say, why? Why are we doing that then? And if you've got a great answer, great, let's keep doing it. But if you haven't, the chances of me poking it get significantly higher.
How does that go down? Because that is so valuable, and that's how you move. And I think the data center industry is so fast moving. How does that approach, I was going to say attitude, how does that approach go down in a corporate environment? Because they're the environments that you think, well, we don't challenge too much. You can challenge, but within this framework, that's often the preconception. I'm not saying that's the reality. So you kind of got that element of being in that corporate environment, as well as a very rapidly developing industry that is data centers. So how does that why questioning challenge go down?
Do you know the combination of the data center industry and JLL is a really interesting one for me, because in my previous roles, particularly the corporate roles, that skill that I have to unpick things has been very valued. But as long as it doesn't go, in inverted commas, too far, and as long as I don't challenge the wrong person or cause anybody to lose face or feel that maybe I've questioned them. And historically I was quite poor at managing that. I'm a bull in a china shop when it comes to following my own curiosity, and I haven't done myself any favors. And I've not really fitted in at previous corporates, again, slight understatement.
Really?
And so I've moved on, and in the back of my mind, there's always the expectation that my time at a corporate is relatively limited, because eventually I will question the wrong person, because I cannot help myself. I have a very poor filter when it comes to self-preservation. So JLL and the data center industry is the interesting mix, because JLL actively looked for me because of those skills. And they're the only company I've ever worked for that positively encourages more of that behavior. There's a distinct lack of ego that goes with working at JLL in the data center team in particular, because the whole point, our brand, our USP, the reason we're in the market is to bring new thinking and to bring intelligent ways of working, and not to repeat the way it's always been done. We're not the oldest player in the market by any means. So trying to do it the way it's always been done makes no sense to us as individuals, let alone as a brand. And oddly, the data center industry has received that extremely well. When you would think, for a process-driven organization that's fundamentally engineering, the opposite would be true. It's been a bit of a revelation.
Really? Do you feel that this is where you were meant to end up, or that this is something? Actually, I'll rephrase that. Are you going to be going for an 11th industry, or have we got you for
no
life?
Promises. And I guess one of the reasons I feel so strongly about talent is that I believe it should be fundamentally based on happiness. So what makes me really happy is building something, following my curiosity, making a positive impact in people's lives, as well as in corporate organizations or businesses' bottom lines, however you choose to look at the results of impact. And the data center industry is currently where I can do all of those things to my heart's content. At some point that may change. I may seek variety, my home circumstances might change. Anything can cause that drive for a change. And because I believe that talent is fundamentally based on happiness, I think you should follow your happiness. And if that means this industry, great. And if it doesn't, also great.
Yeah. Wow.
And I guess given your pathway,
that's unusual in that. I love that, but it's not the norm, which is great.
And sort of thinking about your pathway as well, Catriona, I mean, often the talent conversations that we end up having are, centered around people having certain technical capabilities, which clearly,
Mhm.
can and will be important, but also, that data center specific experience as well. But given a lot of the gaps that, are often we're trying to fill, that's sometimes quite hard to reconcile. But, in terms of what you feel, actually, I can imagine you've experienced yourself clearly with what you're able to bring to the table with that kind of wider view and experience and so on.
Yeah.
Outside of actually having data center specific experience, what do you feel actually in terms of the sector is the ideal sort of traits and behaviors and things like that for people to kind of bring to the table, or if they feel that they have those traits that actually think, what the data center world could be for me?
It's a great question. So I think that the industry has historically not done itself too many favors by an over, what's the right word? An over dependency or an over promotion of the importance of an engineering degree or an engineering qualification. And that's not to diminish the importance of those things, but if you over prioritize them, you end up with a homogenous group of skill sets and thinking, and that isn't how you build high performing teams. We also have to remember that, anecdotally, half of all roles within the data center industry are not engineering. And they don't need to have an engineering lean or bent or background in order to perform extremely well. You do need to understand the industry, but that's true of every industry. You need to understand the nuances. It's true of every industry. Data centers in those terms is no different. And I think historically, data centers has seen itself as quite different, and it does have its own nuances, but it isn't. I've said this a few times now, it's not the dark arts. You don't need to be in the industry for 2.5 years, I think is the average for an entry level job. They're asking for 2.5 years experience. You don't need 2.5 years of experience just to enter. It makes no sense. What are you supposed to just sit there and stare at everyone for 2.5 years until you're allowed to touch anything? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I was hired originally through a set of circumstances, the account they wanted me to work on, the changes that needed to happen were actually about people. It didn't matter that it was in a data center. It was a people-oriented exercise. So they hired somebody who was good with people-oriented exercises. The next role I moved to was a mobilization role within the same company, supporting a brand new transition. And what they needed was organization, structure, and some leadership skills. Hi, I've got those. Off we go. The role after that, I moved to work for Telehouse as the head of operations. They didn't need another engineer. What they needed at that point was someone who could evolve the culture, bring everybody together, make it a bit more efficient, maybe make some of the processes and checks a little more robust. Again, everything that's in my wheelhouse, none of that needed data center experience. And I think 5 or 6 years in at this point, and I still don't necessarily need data center experience to be great at my job. My job is going and talking to customers about their problems and what they need and simply translating that into whether or not we can help. It helps that I have a data center understanding, and it helps that that's from an operational perspective. But it's not completely necessary to be brilliant in this industry.
Yeah, and given the pace that everything's moving at,
Yeah.
if we're constantly trying to work to those parameters, we're never going to be able to bring people in, So it's a challenge. But I mean, we keep banging that drum, and hopefully, these things do, hopefully start to shift, don't they?
But the level of interest in the industry and the curiosity to learn more and lift the lid on things and say, but why? Those are skills that I look for when I hire in this industry. We're currently hiring for a role in my team, and we're not necessarily looking for someone with a data center background. If they have one, great. But actually what we're looking for is for somebody who has an unending curiosity and effectively that wants to become a subject matter expert. That's what we've built our business on. But you can't just continue to hire subject matter experts. Sometimes you have to grow them. You want that balance of perspectives and age and demographic and background, and they don't naturally exist. So we've got some roles that we've hired as fully made SMEs and some that we're growing ourselves. You can't grow an SME from an SME. That's completely backwards. So you do have to understand the skills and the characteristics you're looking for in order for someone to grow into the role that you want for them in 2, 3, 4 years' time.
Yeah. So how is This is one of the questions that we always ask our guests, is around influence. I'm a firm believer, maybe selfishly from my own career, that there are people or moments in our careers that we might not be aware of at the time. It's only when you retrospectively look back that have been extremely influential, usually for the positive, and that then moves on with you through every role and every moment that you have, and impacts how you operate yourself. What's been the biggest influential moment or person in your career, Catriona, and how does that stay with you?
So what started with an understanding of my own curiosity so I used to work for a company called Lyrico. They're a business to business stationery company. It's a commodities business. And throughout that's the company I've stayed at the longest. I was there for 6 years. I had 3 roles in the 6 years. Absolutely lovely company. Would go back in a heartbeat. Loved working there. Still go on mini breaks with my old team. I love it. I loved it. And it had that family feel, but not in an over-reliant, toxic codependency way. It was you're working for each other, and it really feels like that. And it was during my time there that I understood that my curiosity is actually more like I enjoy going out of bounds. I really enjoy going out of bounds of my role. And if you look at one influencing factor in my career development, it's that I was encouraged early to go out of bounds. I was allowed to co-train on the new starters induction. I was allowed to take new people out for the day when they first started. All things that weren't in my role, but allowed me access to opportunity, access to new conversations, access to other people's perspectives. And that consistently going out of bounds, or the courage to utilize my curiosity in that way, was incredibly formative. And if I look back now, had that not been encouraged in the earliest stage of my corporate career, I think I was around 24 at the time, had that not been encouraged or allowed then, I'm not completely sure I would have been as poorly behaved as I am today in terms of staying in my lane. Because I really don't. I'm really terrible at staying in my lane. And what that leads to is it leads to high performing teams. Over and over again, it leads to a level of flexibility and an attitude of welcome. Welcome along, bring everything you've got. Let's take a look at all of it. If you're great at it, let's do more of it. If you're not, should we ignore it? Should we change it? Well, let's figure that out. But it brings that attitude of, let's find out.
Yeah. So they never saw that as a threat?
Nope, not once. It was lovely.
Do you think that's also just from how you started talking about that experience and that time in your career, do you think that's where your belief that careers should be fundamentally about happiness has come from as well?
No, I think that's possibly just the way that I'm wired, because It's not just at work. You won't find me feeling obligated in my personal life either. Essentially, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Which makes me sound incredibly self-centered. I'm not, I promise. But I honestly believe that your happiness should come top. And when you work at a corporate, that corporate organization doesn't have your happiness at the top of their to-do list. 1, it's not possible. 2, it's not practical. So it's entirely up to you to make sure that you put your happiness at the top of your priority list, not to encourage, breaking the law or, anything that is gross misconduct or immoral, but your fundamental happiness in terms of your fulfillment. Are you getting access to what you enjoy doing every day? Are you contributing meaningfully? All of those things that form true human happiness, I think, are really valuable for you to understand about yourself and for you to advocate for. For me, going out of bounds and being able to contribute in a multitude of different ways that weren't my job allowed me to figure out what I wanted my job to be. And it really is that if you can't see it, you can't be it, but not just in role models, also in terms of job role. So I was talking to a couple of people this week around turning points in their career. Both of them have got a moment of opportunity that's arisen that neither of them were expecting. And I was saying to them, look wider than your experience. If you only look through the lens of your previous employer, you're only going to look at roles that exist within that organization. There are thousands of roles in our industry that exist far beyond the lens of your current employer, you have to start considering what's possible before you look at what's probable.
And how does that impact your leadership style then?
That's a great question. I think, like with everyone, my leadership style probably isn't for everyone. If you really enjoy staying in lane and you're of an energy type who requires a significant amount of structure and doesn't really thrive with spontaneity, I think I can be a challenging leader.
I am not the leader.
Thrive in spontaneity. Now, I do have an underpinning of structure in everything I do because we're looking to build something better than we found it. So there is that underpinning of structure. But I genuinely think that agility and creativity and spontaneity is a fundamental part of improvement, continuous improvement, whatever corporate phrase you want to wrap around it. But the only way you get better is if you try new things. I do believe in trying things and failing fast. You know, let's find out. And if it didn't work, let's call it and we'll move on. My leadership style doesn't allow any room for blame or recrimination. It's toxic. It's not helpful. It doesn't move anybody forward. There's no need for it. But there is a need for a high level of integrity and a high level of professional honesty. Those things, I think, for me, go hand in hand. I realise that my leadership style is high energy. There is a huge element of trust and responsibility I put on the people that work with me. I rarely consider myself to be the boss. Don't get me wrong, I always want to be in charge, but I don't necessarily see myself as the boss. And I think that comes out when I talk about the team I work with the people I work with, when I introduce my team to other people, because I want them to feel ownership of what we're doing together. So if you really do just want to do your job, grow maybe incrementally and step and repeat, I could imagine my leadership style being somewhat terrifying.
It's having eyes open to opportunities and solutions and things like that, as opposed to blinkers on.
Yeah, bring it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how crazy it sounds, we will talk about it. And if we think there's something in there, we might explore it for a year before we try it, or we might just, sketch it on a piece of paper and go for it. And all of that is about teaching the team risk management, mitigation, an understanding of consequences, all of the things that you need to be a high-performing professional in any career. All of those critical thinking skills you need to practice, but if you never get access to them, how do you get to practice them?
You need to trust the environment and and fail within that, and that's okay, that's part of that growth. So what are the conversations that you're having with your clients? What are the topics? How are things evolving from a talent perspective? What are the problems? Sorry, I'm asking literally about a million questions here. What I'm trying to understand is, what are the problems that you are solving for your clients, and how have they evolved over time?
I'm going to answer a slightly different question. I'm going to answer a question about the reason my business exists.
Okay.
So data center consulting, I believe, exists because there are gaps in other people's companies in terms of the talent profile that they have. And I think that's why consulting full stop exists. Within our industry, however, the consultants that you often get aren't like traditional consultants. So they're not necessarily doing large target operating model projects. They're more likely to be doing subject matter expert work. And the way that we frame our business is to say, we'll bring you an SME, we'll help you close that gap, but we want to leave you better than we found you. We want to equip you so that you don't have the same gap in future. And that can be, we leave skills behind, we leave processes behind, we leave something completely finished and smoothed off for the client. But the point is, we don't want to go back and do the same work for them again. We want to help them evolve and close that gap. And part of that, the origin of that work in the first place, is the client being able to say, I've got a gap. So having conversations about talent and how it's okay to have gaps in an industry that's growing this quickly, that has always historically run lean, wonderful euphemism for horribly understaffed.
Yeah.
That lean organization is never going to be able to keep up with organic growth, let alone the growth rates that we see in this industry, you've got businesses doubling in size every 2 to 3 years. If they started off as small to medium-sized enterprises 5 years ago, they're never going to be able to recruit quickly enough, even if this industry itself didn't have a talent shortage. So what we see our role is to go into businesses to strengthen using subject matter experts, to strengthen what they already have, and ideally upskill them. We do the same internally with JLL. So our business model as a consulting team is to use the wider organization. For example, if we win an opportunity to talk to a client about some sustainability related issues, we will take our sustainability consulting team in with us. So you get your data center team and the sustainability consulting team, and we'll go in together to address the issue that the client may have together. The client gets 2 SMEs minimum instead of 1 all-rounder, because we're looking to close that gap with them and for them. Now, the benefit for us internally is we're upskilling our sustainability colleagues and they're upskilling us. Everything that we do in this industry is designed to leave more knowledge than it found.
That's the ultimate consulting solution, isn't it?
Yeah. You effectively make yourself redundant because you've truly helped solve a problem instead of contributed and left. It's not what we're trying to build. That's not the point.
Yeah, there's no legacy there.
And I guess coming back to that idea that, no idea is a silly idea, and let's be open-minded about and creative with our thinking to kind of solve problems for clients and fill those gaps and things like that. I mean, in terms of that, I would see as being immensely useful, clearly, at any time, but particularly in this sector at this time, as things are changing so quickly. And if you're unable to think creatively, perhaps, or not willing to, then it makes it much harder to provide that kind of service that you just sort of outlined there. And I don't know what your thoughts are, given your role in terms of some of those forces that are currently at play at the moment that are reshaping the sector, and maybe what you're seeing there in terms of gaps that are now opening up that maybe didn't exist before, and things like that you're then able to kind of support with.
And the driver for those gaps is usually one of 2 things. It's either legislation or customer demand. And certainly in terms of sustainability and structure and processes, but the third element to that is really climate. So the design changes we've seen have been because of client demand for AI, but they've also been because we were historically designing data centers to operate at a maximum 35 degrees in the UK specifically. That is not an appropriate temperature to have as your max anymore. So as well as the normal legislation, i.e. a governing body is making us do it, or there's a fee payer, a customer making us do it, there is also necessity that we've never seen before in terms of the way the world is literally changing. The fourth element to that now becomes people and talent, where historically you had the ability to go to market and close gaps or grow. It's simply not there. So what's become some really simple demand drivers in terms of change management has now become multi-layer, multi-complex in terms of the origin of the request and how you have to go about solving it. Now, in terms of data center design, that's almost entirely creativity. In terms of solving a talent issue, it's almost entirely creativity. So you're looking at having to solve new problems using skills that this industry has never traditionally had to rely on, and it does cause a euphemistic pinch point.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the timeframes involved. I mean, whatever you're doing today from a design perspective, for example, it is only going to be then realized 3 to 5 years down the line as to whether that's what you do need. So I guess all of these things need to be factored into creating, I don't know, maybe it's a flexible kind of approach to being able to, or agile, or whatever the right kind of descriptor is in terms of those designs.
And that's what we see. So you see large developments going up across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and those developers are leaving it to the last possible minute to make a final decision, let alone actually fit anything out in terms of what goes into the grey space that directly impacts the white space. Those decisions aren't being made until leases are signed and the lease holder informs you of what they want, whether that's air cooling, liquid cooling, you know, what type of liquid cooling, if you are going for liquid cooling. All of those things are TBC, TBC, TBC. And when you have a development timeline, exactly like you say, of you know, from the moment you decide you're going to do it to it being built, I don't know, 3 to 5 years really on average, I suppose. But you've got NVIDIA releasing new product every 18 months. That is not something that you can match up. And you know, the speed with which NVIDIA has increased the compute power was unexpected and unheard of, unprecedented, and design simply can't keep up in those terms because it just takes so much longer.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? It's a real challenge, that, because you know, if they've done what they've done, you know, to increase that compute, you sort of think, well, actually, if they've made that leap, what's to stop another leap then coming through in the next 18 months?
Exactly right.
Just as you kind of start to get your head around what they've brought forward, it then moves forward again. But we'll see, I suppose.
Now, the exciting thing for me is that all of those things make us, in technology terms, in innovation terms, on the absolute cutting edge of what's possible. And I absolutely love that. You know, being so connected to changes that impact the entire world and being at the forefront of making those things possible still now gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, that's really impactful. And I think for a why person, that we need why people now more than ever, because it's never evolved quicker and it will never evolve as slowly as this, you know, the pace. So we need those whys, action, why action, why action. And that's why I was keen to talk to you about your women speaker series, because you're encouraging all of us. So, you know, how did you conceptualize that, and how did that come about? And what's the impact that that's having?
So it came back because I was attending data center events as a new entrant to the industry, and the panels that I was going to I found interesting and enjoyed them. And then I went back the second year, and it was very similar, if not the same people saying very similar, if not exactly the same things. And I was a bit foxed as to why the same things were being said in an industry that was moving that quickly. And then I would have side conversations with women I'd met in the industry through friends or networking. And the conversations I was having were so interesting. I started to wonder why those people were on the stage instead of these people. And so anecdotally, I started to ask the women, pretty much every woman I met, actually, I don't know whether it was a little bit weird in the end, I had to stop, saying, why aren't you on that stage? And the answer was usually a nervous laugh, and oh no, absolutely not. Or, oh, I've never been asked. With a follow-up question of, well, if you were asked, would you say yes? No, absolutely not. When you ask those people that give those answers why, invariably they say, I've never done it. And the first time I do it is not going to be up there in front of my industry. Oh, okay. So we've got organisers who don't know that you exist. They don't know to ask you. And we've got a group of women who are totally capable of doing it, but won't, because it'll be the first time they ever do it. I thought, well, I can solve those two things all by myself. Yeah. So I decided to use a bit of JLL's real estate, one of the offices, and invite 12 women that I had met and convinced to give this a go. And I asked a very powerful leader within JLL to be an expert for the day or for the morning, to say, here's what I think you could do. Here's some feedback on what you did today. Here's how I think you could improve, you know, genuine one-to-one feedback. So the format is there's 12 women. They're split into 3 groups. Of those 3 groups of 4 women, one acts as the moderator. I supply the questions. They're very straightforward questions about networking, mentoring, or development. And that moderator asks the other 3 people in their group, who have to sit at the front of the room on my now famous uncomfortably high chairs. They have to just ask each of those women each of those questions. And the point isn't what they say. That's why they're, you know, generically neutral topics. The point isn't what they say. The point is they experience that fear, the breathlessness, the uncomfortable sweat, the fact that you can't get on or off those stools without feeling like you may end up in A&E. All of those things are experienced in a room full of people who really want you to do well and are there to give you feedback. So I started doing it, went really well. Everybody that came said, very openly to me, I don't want to be here. Okay, but you're here now. And then at the end of it, almost everyone in the room said, can you do that again, but can you make it more difficult?
Wow.
Okay, that's really interesting, because they didn't think they were going to enjoy it. They didn't particularly enjoy it. And then they did. And that moment of discovery about yourself is incredibly addictive for me. So running these sessions is just wonderful to see the impact that that opportunity has on the women in that room. They have an opportunity to discover whether or not they like something that you wouldn't ordinarily get the chance to do unless it's in front of 50 people. And often, particularly if you're at the supply chain end, your business has to pay for you to have that opportunity, pay for you to have that access to a panel. And you're not going to encourage your company to pay for something you don't think you want to do.
Were you then a panelist for data center dynamics after that, or was that before?
So I really should have set this up before a panel was inflicted on me, but I didn't. It came up afterwards. So my boss's boss at the time was our CEO, Sue Asprey-Price. She was asked to do 2 panels in Cannes at the event in Cannes, Cloud Global Congress, and I was volunteered as her stand-in because quite near the event she couldn't make it. And when your boss's boss tells you to do something, you just sort of nod. All right. Well, and again, what's the worst that can happen? I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Pure terror. And my kneecaps sweated. I don't know if you knew that your kneecaps could sweat. They can.
Yeah.
It's a thing. So I did the first panel during the day and don't really remember it. We did loads of prep for it. Think it went relatively well in that I didn't drop the F-bomb and didn't get fired. They were my lines of success. Win. And then I did one in the evening with the Women's Tech Forum, at which point I had decided that I was so sweaty from the day that I'm all out of professional filter at this point. I'm just going to go up there and I'm going to be myself. And if they don't ask me back, I would understand. Yep. And so I think because I went at it without a corporate filter, it went better than it ever could have. In terms of I just was very much myself. My experience across those 2 panels was so entirely different that it was one of the things that inspired the opportunity for other people. Because whilst I don't think I'm ever going to be someone that really loves being on stage, I much prefer being at the side with a clipboard, making everybody else do it.
I do.
Right. I'm never going to be the person that seeks that. There's definitely a level of enjoyment that comes from having people respond to your life experience. And so having more women have that experience and have more women understand that there's a room full of people, if not an industry full of people, that wants to hear their voice. Again, one of the goosebump moments for me of, oh, I think I understand why it's as important as it is. It's not just it should be balanced. It's no, this can impact the way that you look at yourself, let alone the impact it can have on your career if you're more visible, the confidence it can give you, in that confidence is the ability to stand up and openly say, no, I want to take up space and I'm confident in my voice. And if you don't like it, I get it, but I'm not only entitled, but I'm qualified to be up here.
I think that is a lesson that, and I don't think it's exclusively for women, but I think it's very typically for women that we are experiencing quite late in our careers, because that was never the mold, that was never how it went. And that's why I was really keen to get you on the podcast, because you've put your head above the parapet and you're bringing others along with you. And so it's not just the call to action, it's the action bit of that's important. And I think it's having a really powerful impact. I'm glad it's having an impact on you, a positive impact on you, but it's also significantly having an impact on so many other people. And I think it's really important to hear those stories, and that you're enabling others to fail safely. And that is part of the stretch. And then that's the moving bit that we need.
And then there's a second part to it where I then make everybody who's ever been on one of my sessions agree to go on the list that goes to Europe's event organisers. So I share that list of people They have to opt out now. Originally I let them opt in. Now I'm like, no, you have to opt out. And I share that list with the event organisers and gently harass them into getting in touch with the women on the list, that they stick them into LinkedIn, they can have a look at their bios, and they actively, now these event organisers are seeking out some of these women to come and talk at their events.
Really?
And we're actually seeing them show up on stage, confident, invited, not having to pay for the space, and they're being invited because they are respected and somebody wants to hear what they have to say.
That's brilliant.
You obviously hit the nail on the head with that first session that you ran there, because you had it set up perfectly for people to feel uncomfortable enough that they're feeling challenged, and this is outside of my comfort zone and all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
But then at the end of it, not only did they want to have another session, but they wanted it to be harder, and be challenged further. So, I mean, in terms of, reaching that objective and ticking that, I mean, you absolutely smashed that, and look at what it's achieved now. It's amazing.
It is. And the recent event we hosted the 3rd of July, so 2 weeks ago now, that Louisa Buckley at Schneider helped me engineer, that collaboration came about because I couldn't find a way to source microphones, cameras and lights. It was just beyond my means. I couldn't, try as I might, I couldn't talk anyone into paying for it. And then Louisa said, look, we've got, as a business, Schneider Electric, we've got a real drive and desire to support this kind of initiative. Let me go and ask to see if I can convince someone. And she came back to say, yeah, we'll do it. So Schneider hosted, we had 10 women on stage who had been at a previous one of these events. The first season 1, we ended up calling it, slightly American. Don't know how it happened. It's stuck.
That's what we're calling this podcast.
Right.
It was butt clenching yesterday when I was telling the team. I was like, we're recording season 1.
Yeah. Doesn't it sound American?
Yeah.
So anyone who'd been to season 1, I invited 10 of those to be the panelists for season 2, and then everyone else in the audience was someone else who had already been on season 1. So they all understood the format. They were all there to give feedback, because they know that's an active part of the session, is for everybody to give feedback and for them to feel part of the experience. The other side to it was I still got an expert to give those 10 panelists one-to-one feedback in the room. Now, it takes enormous courage to be given feedback in front of 30 people. So, and I hope those 10 women have now appreciated quite what the amount of courage it took to go up there, prepared as they were, to then have to experience one-to-one feedback on camera in front of 30 people, because that meant the entire room learned what they learned.
Yeah.
The power of that and the scale of that was joyful.
I have to say, I think that takes courage to give that feedback as well in that environment. That's amazing. That's really amazing. I think one thing, I could literally sit here for hours and chat, because this is, we are going deep into it, and it's absolutely fantastic. I suppose the one thing Ollie and I are really keen to hear from all of our guests is, what are you most excited about for the next 5 years in our industry?
I'd love to say I'd had a recent epiphany, but it's the same thing I was excited about when I first wandered into a data center, is that this feels like the beginning. It feels like the absolute beginning of something amazing. And it, I've said it a couple of times, I get goosebumps. This industry, it's mission oriented, it's purposeful. There's a real impact it makes on the world. They're all 3 things that I love to be part of and to contribute to. And being part of an industry that does that on a global scale, and it touches absolutely every single person's life in some way. Yes. You cannot escape reality today from a data center service perspective. So being part of that, but knowing it's right at the beginning, I find incredibly inspirational, very exciting, and is probably what's going to keep me interested for the foreseeable.
Yeah, great. We don't want that 11th industry. Catriona, we have absolutely loved talking to you today, hearing your story, but also hearing your insights into, what's got you where you are today, and how you're impacting other people in the industry, and so generously. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Catriona.